Hey, what's up you guys? Today I'm going to talk about some self-published books that I have read in 2020 and really enjoyed, because self-published books don't really get talked about a lot on BookTube, so I thought I would just bring some to your attention. I have 2 fantasy, 2 contemporary and 1 non-fiction, so hopefully you find at least one of these interesting. I really enjoyed all of them and I hope you did too. I also at the end of the video talk about a couple books that are self-published that I have not read yet but are on my TBR. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, please subscribe, and also definitely let me know any recommendations of self-published books that you have read in the comments, because I'm always on the lookout for more. I tried to make it a goal for 2020 for the second half to read 1 a month, and I kind of hit that. I think I missed one last month, but you know, we do try. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and let's just get started. The very first book is A Death at Dawn by Gabrielle Gray, and this is a high fantasy book that follows different members of the royal family of the world that the fantasy is set in, and it has a lot of different POVs. Everyone is competing for power and there's a lot of secret plotting going on, there's backstabbing, there's a lot of distrust. None of the characters really trust each other at all, which makes for a very interesting story. At first I was a little apprehensive about following so many different POVs, but all of them were so unique and interesting that I actually really enjoyed it. A lot of the time with different POVs, I feel like sometimes some chapters you're just waiting to get to a different chapter of a different character, but I honestly did enjoy every single character and every single POV, which was so fun and definitely makes for a great reading experience, because like I said, everyone is competing with each other and backstabbing each other, things like that. All of the characters and the side characters were really fleshed out, and I was super invested in all of their stories and all of their individual journeys. The world as well is very fleshed out and very interesting. There's a lot of history, but never in like an info dumpy way or anything like that, and history does have an impact on the present day story. So I just think it was really well written and I highly recommend it. This is a very adult book though, so it's a very dark fantasy and there's a lot of violence, murder, rape, but it's never offensive or like explicit in a way. It never really is glamorized or anything like that. It's just very brutal and realistic for this kind of different dark fantasy world. Everything makes sense in the context of this story. So something I also really enjoyed was that racism and sexism was explored. And the author herself is a black woman, so you know, she does this really well, and it's not like a forced message or anything, it's just interconnected into the story, and I really enjoyed it. So if you are looking for an adult dark fantasy, I definitely recommend A Death at Dawn. One Final Vinyl is a contemporary by another YouTuber. She makes authorship videos and also videos about being a small business owner, and her name is Savvy, and I will link her channel in the description below. I will also, I meant to say, leave links to all of the books in the description, which normally I don't do because I don't really want to like Amazon, but because they're self-published, I think the easiest way to buy all of these is through Amazon, so that will be in the description. But anyway, One Final Vinyl is a really fun book that I read in one sitting. We follow Emma on her last day in her hometown before she moves out to college, and she has planned a party, or I think her parents planned a party for like graduating and going away, and nobody shows up apart from a 90-year-old woman with dementia who doesn't know how she got there or where she came from. Emma works out the care home that the woman is talking about and drives her across country or across state to the care home. This is just a really fun coming of age road trip story, and I, like I said, read it in one sitting, so I was super engaged and really enjoyed it. It gave me a lot of Booksmart vibes, if you've ever seen that movie. I don't know how to even say why it gave me that vibe, but it was just the kind of language and the characters, and it was very realistic and fun. I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. Something that I must say is it's very character focused and not plot focused. Emma and the older woman are comparing life stories, and the older woman's giving Emma advice and things like that. So there's a lot of time going through Emma's memories and her reflecting on things and exploring kind of why she is the way she is and why she maybe doesn't have really good friends and stuff like that. So I just thought it was really interesting and definitely a super good book for people that are interested in character-driven stories. Next, I want to talk about Someone's Story by B.A. Bellick, and this is another contemporary, and this story deals with growing up, mental illness and friendship. Our main character is really struggling with his mental health and we follow his journey. So it has a very inspiring and motivating message to it, and there's a lot of heavy topics that are addressed, but they're all done really well and very tastefully. So the characters in this are very interesting. This is again a very character driven story. I think most contemporaries kind of are, and you really get to know the main character, who is only known as someone. He doesn't give himself a name. He doesn't really feel like he deserves a name. He feels kind of like a shell of a person in a way. It has some very heartfelt, sad moments, but it was overall a very enjoyable read despite obviously being about some darker and heavier topics. The writing style is quite unique, so whenever there's dialogue, it's written in the form of like a script. The rest of the story is written normally, but then the dialogue is written like a script, which takes a second to get used to, but I actually really enjoyed it. I thought that it made it easier to read and faster to read as well, which I do love a fast read. So a minor issue I had is that the characters sometimes spoke rather deeply and didn't talk like real teenagers, but this kind of added to the script quality of it. And even though it took me a little bit out of the story, I don't think it was really a bad thing because it has a really great message to it, and the characters are definitely interesting characters. So even though they do feel definitely like characters rather than real people, I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing. So if you are again a fan of contemporaries and looking for one that talks about mental health with a really good message, I highly recommend Someone's Story. The next book I want to talk about is Sacrificial Lamb by Ashley Nicole, and this is a more urban fantasy slash paranormal romance in a way, but it's really interesting. So this book follows a college student named Katie who reunites with her childhood best friend Matthew. He basically forces her to cheat on her boyfriend Scott, and this causes a huge argument between them and they break up. Lots of other negative things happen in Katie's life all at once, and she actually kills herself. Then a week later, Scott kills himself, and when they get to heaven, everything seems perfect at first, but slowly they realise that things are not as it seems. So when I first started this book, I was thinking that I wasn't actually going to like it that much, because I don't mean it as a knock on the author, but the writing is very simple and very straight to the point. But as I read more, I actually got really invested and I really cared about the story. I thought it was really interesting. I really cared about the characters as well. So although the writing was simple, it was very engaging and made it a very fast read. The simple writing just meant that basically I read it faster, and that's exactly what you need sometimes. Sometimes you want a book that you can just flick through, and this one, as opposed to the others, is very story driven. The characters were all really interesting as well, and their relationships to each other was interesting to explore, because obviously you have the childhood best friend, then you have the boyfriend and stuff like that. At first, the characters do act very irrationally. For example, the suicide, when it happens, you are thinking to yourself, like, where did this come from? Like, maybe your life's a little bit of a mess, but you didn't have to kill yourself. But the irrationality of the characters is actually a big plot point, which I don't want to spoil at all, but it makes sense in the context of the story later on when things get more explained. So I thought that was really cool, and it definitely like makes you double guess yourself, because at the start I was like, why are the characters like acting like this? But it actually has a reason in the plot. So I thought it was quite interesting. If you are interested in, fantasy stories with a more realistic-ish setting, I definitely recommend this one. And although it is about like heaven and angels and stuff, it's not like a religious story. It doesn't push any message like that. It's just got angels and stuff in it. Kind of like Shadowhunters in a way has angels, but it's not a religious story, that type of thing. The next book is a non-fiction, and this is Rising Above Opioid Addiction by Sierra Teixeira Russell. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. And this is a non-fiction book about a Native American author's life. So she grew up in an extremely physically and emotionally abusive household. The trauma from this followed her throughout her life, and later on she became addicted to different drugs. She attempted suicide. She became a teen mom. She struggled a lot with a lot of different things, and her life is definitely very hard. She persevered though and actually went to Harvard and law school. However, she never really addressed her trauma, and it always follows her, and she ends up sinking back into drug addiction and suffering through a lot more issues. This does have a happy ending though, you'll be glad to hear, and it is a story about hope and overcoming trauma, and the author's writing is very captivating. It's very brutal at times, especially about the parts about her childhood. So if you need content warnings about, abusive childhoods and things like that, then maybe give this one a miss. But it was a very touching and heartfelt story with a really, positive message at the end about how anyone can overcome things, and I really enjoyed it. And obviously, as well, it is by a Native American author, which makes it even more unique because it has, she talks about her culture and growing up in an abusive household and a Native American culture and things like that. So I definitely would recommend everyone checks this out if they, aren't triggered by that type of thing, because it is a really inspiring story. And then finally, two that I have not read yet, but I have on my Kindle. The first one is Beyond the Gates by Kayla Davenport, who is also a booktuber. I will leave her channel in the description as well. And this is a YA dystopian about a girl who grows up in a government facility that trains genetically evolved children with special abilities, and she goes out into the real world for the first time on a mission to hunt down a boy that the government has declared an enemy. So I think that sounds really interesting. The government facility with the children is giving me kind of X-Men vibes, and I think this sounds really interesting. It's a 4-book series, which is very ambitious. Like, good luck Kayla with that, because I cannot write a 4-book series, but I think it sounds really cool, so I will leave the links in the description. Even though I haven't read it yet, I'm sure it'll be great. And then I also have one called Pages from the Pizza Crows by Evan Wiltmer, and this is a short story collection, which I don't love short story collections, but this one sounded really interesting. It is odd fiction, so that's a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of just weirdness, and all of the stories, apparently, I was looking for the Goodreads reviews, and people say that they're all really captivating and funny, so hopefully I feel the same. And I, again, will leave the link to this one down below, but I haven't read this yet, so I can't say whether I liked it or not. But I think both of those sound really cool, and I'm excited to get to them in the first couple months of 2021. So if any of these stories or books sound interesting to you, I again will leave all of the links in the description to Amazon pages for them, which I do normally try and avoid Amazon, but you know, sometimes you just have to. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Definitely also give me any recommendations for self-published books that you loved, because again, I'm always on the lookout for some. I really like to try and put at least one into my TBR every month, so I'm always open to suggestions for them. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, please subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.